Alright, hey everybody. It's been quite a while since I made anything. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to do a little work on this little air compressor. I've had this for several years, and the last couple times I used it, it would build up to 80 psi and stop, and that's it. And it would just run and run and run, and I shut it off and I could hear it hissing, and I'm pretty sure it's out of the pressure regulator. So we're going to pop that apart today and see if it's dirty or filthy in there, and replace the O-ring and see if that's the issue. Now, the only thing you need to take this apart is a little screwdriver, pair of pliers, and I'll show you why. There's a pin in here. If you rotate it around, you'll see a little brass pin. You probably can't see that, but there's a hole there. Little tiny brass pin. I lost it for the last day and a half now, and I finally found it. But I removed that already. You just take your little screwdriver, put it behind it, and pry it out. Grab your pliers, pull it out the rest of the way, and this should pull right out. The reason why I have the top off right now is because after it builds up pressure, I want to make sure that it was leaking in the regulator and not anywhere else. So the top doesn't have to be off to do this. You take the cap off. There is your spring. And then you take your pliers that you had before, and you just pull out the regulator seal. This one's got a flat O-ring on it, so we're going to replace it with a round O-ring and see if that fixes the problem. So I'm going to probably put a little layer of grease on this O-ring before I install it, because I never install mine dry. So we will take the screwdriver and we'll pop out the old O-ring. We'll put the new one on it, but first I'm gonna go to the other portion of the garage and put a thin layer of grease on it. Then we will install it, turn it back on, bring it up to pressure, and see if I made it better or worse. This is the first time I've done this. I looked in there and there's a little bit of corrosion, but the sealing surface of the regulator is still clean. So I'm gonna put the O-ring on, put a thin layer of grease, we're gonna put it back together, and then I'm gonna start it up. I'm not gonna bore you with sitting here and running it for 15 minutes. So we'll install it, I'll turn it on, and then we'll come back to see if it made it better or worse. Okay, that didn't take too long. We got the new O-ring on it, put a little layer of grease on it. So we're going to install this. This pin goes in first, and the spring rests against this piece here. That brass pin that I showed you guys, I'm not going to put that in yet, because I want to make sure that this works first. Then I'll put that safety pin, that brass safety pin back in. Be careful with this, you don't want to break it or you're going to be right where you started. You son of a bitch, go on there. There we go. Alright. Going to take your spring, put it back in your pressure regulator. This usually just lines up on its own once you start screwing it in. And then we're going to screw it the whole way in. We're going to plug it in. And if this doesn't work, I have a bigger O-ring for it that I might just put back in, that I might put in, and then we'll try it. So okay, we're back. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's still hissing a little bit. We've still only made it to 80 psi. So what I'm going to probably do is drain the air out of it, and then see if I can install the bigger O-ring and then go with that. It kind of sucks that it only makes it to 80 psi. That's hardly enough to fill a tire, because this little tank runs out super fast. So we are going to install a bigger O-ring, slightly bigger. It might not even push into the housing after I do that. But we're going to try it anyway. I want to save this little thing. I don't really feel like buying another one. And it was cheap. I mean, so it is what it is. So we are going to drain the air right now. Get the air out of it and take it apart again. O-rings are cheap, so I don't mind screwing around with it. So we're going to see if we can put this one on and make it fit. So we will be back again. Okay, everybody, this is what I found. I went to try to put that bigger rubber washer in it. Doesn't fit. Just a little bit too big, and that's probably a good thing. I put the old one in, but when I went to push that white piece in that I was showing you earlier with the O-ring on it, it felt like it could go further than what the spring tension was pushing on it. This thing's probably about 15 years old. I had it when I lived at my old house, and then the one before that. I mean, so it's quite a few years old. So what I found out was, and right here, we're at about 120, little under PSI. No hissing, no leaking. It's still turned on, and the spring tension from being so old wasn't quite strong enough to keep constant pressure on that valve piece. So what I did was I took two washers, two plain metal washers in a pack like this, and I put them in between the spring and the white piece that houses that rubber washer, so it has a little bit more tension, and that seemed to be the problem. So now we got a fully functional air compressor again. So if you guys are ever tearing this apart, or if you're not building pressure, or if you're not building pressure, it's probably your regulator altogether. That white piece can break. That's why I stopped with that big rubber washer, because I was afraid that I was going to bust that flimsy plastic piece. So it might not even be your O-rings. It might actually be the tensioner spring. So give that a try and see what happens. Thank you. Oh, and before I forget, put your little safety pin for your regulator in. Normally, if it was just me at the house, I would just leave it as is. But since I have youngins around, it's probably a good thing to put it back in. So you just grip it with a pair of pliers, push it in that hole, and that's it. So it doesn't come the whole way out, because if you have little kids monkeying around with it or whatever, they could unscrew it the whole way and get popped in the bean with it. So if you find this video helpful, let me know in the comments. Thanks.